seem to like that. I did build them a swing, so they do have a swing up
Oh,
there.
okay.
So, oh yeah, I
Well, do
know.
you ever have to train
Yeah.
yours to get up on the roost?
They sometimes I'm like, listen, we're chickens. We roost. We do not sleep in the nesting boxes. So I sometimes have to put wood in front to get them, kick them out. I'll go kick them out. Come on, they're chickens. Roost.
You're listening to the Foundry Talk podcast with your hosts, Nate McLean and Perry Merritt. Take it away, boys.
Well, we are talking this morning with Julie Markee, Key Process Innovations. And we're not only talking about chickens, but we are talking about business process within a foundry. We're going to talk about some things about investment casting. So hopefully we'll find a little bit of something of interest along the way here. Julie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how your time in the investment world, and now what you're up to these days.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on your podcast. It's great to be here. Anytime I can talk about chickens, life is good. So I actually came from an entrepreneurial family, and I started my first business when I was 12 years old as a
Wow.
private swimming instructor. And I I absolutely love doing that. I guess you could say that what I learned how to do was to lie to children at a young age so that I could, when they asked me, "Are you going to let go of my hands?" and I'd say no, and then I would, knowing I was going to, so they could learn how to swim by themselves. Very much, it was so fun to watch them when they finally were able to swim by themselves. So I love doing that. I did that for I don't know, like 8 or 9 years,
Mm.
and, never had that was my summer job, and after my parents sold the house without the pool, then I had to figure out how to continue this, and I would basically pick up kids around the Yakima Valley and bring them to somebody's pool, and then do discounted lessons for the people who own the pool, and then I could, that's how I grew my business, after mom and dad, sold the house. So that whole thing just set me up for what I do now. But between then and now, I got a degree in chemical engineering from the University of Washington. And if you spend enough time with me, you'll know I am a geeky engineer. So I think like an engineer. I very much enjoy that. But there's two tracks for engineering, for chemical engineering. You can go make chemicals or you can be a process engineer. So I'm a process engineer and I spent a lot of my career in manufacturing, and I did everything from project management, operations management, process engineering. And then I went into sales and I started selling chemicals in the investment casting industry. And I absolutely loved investment casting. That's just my passion. I love the process. There's process inside of process. And it's just kind of been my heart when I walk into a foundry. I love the smell and I feel like I'm home. So I spent over 20 years in investment casting. During that time, I started my business, Key Process Innovations, where I did consulting work in there. I was on the board of directors for the Investment Casting Institute. And most recently, I've kind of stepped a little bit away from the process side and doing more of EOS implementation. And we can talk about that at some point, what that looks like. But you were here to talk about Foundry, which I'm always happy to talk about. So, Nate, you've been in the Foundry industry for a little while. I'm sure you've got some background to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the, as far as the investment side of things, I'm a little newer in that regard, because most of everything that I've done has always been sand. So I'm always interested in capturing as much information as possible. And when Aaron with West Tech Direct had stopped by, had mentioned that there was we were talking about drying of shells and the process involved with that, and he had mentioned, well, you need to talk to Julie. She's very intelligent, and she developed a product called the KPI Dry. And of course, when he kind of hit on some of the high notes, I was like, man, yeah, I definitely need to talk to her. That's pretty interesting. And it was something that I had never heard of. Doing some research, and I was pleasantly surprised how easy it was to actually get a hold of Julie. So that was a plus, because sometimes people aren't easy to get a hold of these days. So, but yeah, as far as the controlling the processes with it when it comes to the foundry, especially with the people that are out in the plant itself, dipping and shelling, creating those trees for to make that process as efficient as possible. Knowing that there's a tool out there to actually help control that process in KPI Dry, a patented product that you had developed, was very interesting to me in that regard.
Mhm. Yeah. So when I was selling shell materials for in the into the industry, the whole thing, if you understand investment casting process, you'll know that we're building a ceramic shell around a wax pattern, but you're building that layer by layer, and it's really important that you have those layers dry enough before you apply the next layer, and then dry enough so you can take the wax out of it as the next step in the process. So that's very rudimentary explanation if you don't know investment casting. The challenge was, how dry does my mold need to be before I apply that next layer and before I go to the dewax process? And there was really no way to measure that. And I had different tools that I tried during the years that I was selling the chemicals. None of them really, they weren't repeatable, they weren't really accurate. It was really frustrating. And so when I started my business, I said, I need to solve this. You cannot answer the question if you don't have a way to measure it. So I just started doing some research and I found a way to do this using temperature and relative humidity. And really, it's relative humidity is the key in those hard to dry areas of the mold. So I did some proof of concept testing at a foundry nearby in Albany, Oregon. They were kind enough to open their doors to me and just did the testing. And then ultimately, I built. I had to have the product manufactured, so I have a guy that does all that for me. He's still working with me, and we just created this product. And the great thing about KPI Dry is you can actually measure the temperature and relative humidity in real time using wireless technology. My newest version, actually, you can connect it to your intranet, and you can go to any device, type in the address, and you can bring up and see exactly how dry your mold is. So much more accurate. So now you know how to develop your drying process. And it was my lifelong goal to have a patent. It's on my list of things I want to get done in my life. And so I have one now. It's on the wall. And I like to say, I was at Stryker. They used my device in the past, and they have a whole patent wall. Like all their patents are on the wall when you get there. So I'd like to say I have a patent wall too. I only have one patent, but it is on the wall. So hence the name, a patent wall. But
More patent than I've got.
uh, you know what? It costs a lot of money, so I don't know if it was really worth all that. But
A lot
I
of work too
accomplished.
to get a patent. It seems like I assume you did the provisional first, then it went to the. It's a
Yeah.
lot of time and a lot of work, a lot of revisions going through patent attorneys, and I've done a couple. And yeah, congratulations, you made it through and you got one. It can be hard to
Well,
do.
my patent attorney, whenever he just sent me an email recently, and every time I hear from him, he just makes me so happy. He fills me with joy.
Mhm.
He's such a great human being and was so encouraging because I'm like, I don't know if I can patent this. I don't know anything about this process. And for him, he just took great care of me. So the whole process was enjoyable and brings joy to me. So I always, to me, something, whenever you're doing something, the whole experience impacts how you feel about it. And so for me, the patent and Rob Ireland and what he did for me, just it's all part of a great journey of which I finally got the thing that I wanted. So,
Yeah. Well,
and we're helping Foundry owners. So that's good.
again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
congratulations on that. My experience with patents is when I worked in large corporate world and and with hundreds of engineers, and we would come up with ideas, and suddenly you'd get notified that, hey, part of your idea got incorporated with this other thing, and we put it in a patent, and it was been awarded. Oh, okay. And then my only other, and I've had 8 or 9 of those, but it's like, yeah, there's no ownership in it. You don't feel any real sense of achievement because you really didn't have anything to do with it except for one teeny piece. And then the one patent that I tried to get that I thought was actually truly innovative, my patent attorney wasn't the same as your patent attorney, did not fight for me, didn't do anything, and I just died in the review process because they didn't understand what I was talking about, and they said, "No, this doesn't look innovative." I was like, "But yeah, but it is." So, so that, I mean, I want to ask you, so you talk about, we're kind of jumping around here a little bit, but we were talking earlier about, what you're doing with KPI, with your key process innovations. And, uh, my experience has been kind of different than your experience. And as I said, I came out of the corporate world, and, I worked at companies that were 20, 30, 40,000. At one point I worked at a company that was 300,000 employees. And, it's a different world because in my experience, these process things would come down from above, from people you don't know, you never talk to, but it's something that they're suddenly interested in, and, "Hey, this looks sexy, let's do it." And it would trickle down to the guys in the trenches or the lower level management, and they'd be told, "Go implement this thing. Go figure out how to go to the classes, go to, work with the trainers, whatever, and get it done." And within 2 months, 3 months, it was all just a thing of the past, right? I mean, we go through this stuff because somebody thought it was interesting, and nothing would ever come of it. And I'm curious how I really do assume that what you're doing is very different than what I've experienced. And I'm curious, is it, and how is it different if it is?
So EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. So it's a way of running your business, kind of orchestrating and all the moving parts in your business. So you can run a better business and live a better life. That's what EOS is. And EOS is not for the type of companies that you came out of, Perry. It's
Yeah.
not for corporations. It's for entrepreneurial companies that 10 to 250 employees, growth oriented, open minded, respectful, willing to be vulnerable with the people around them, and more afraid of status quo than of change. And so I came out of corporate America, and that's not those aren't the type of companies that I work with anymore. So these are the type of companies that I work with. I'm listening for them, that they genuinely care about their employees. If they don't, I can't work with them. It just doesn't work for me, because that's one of the things. They have to care about their employees. 2, they have to be willing to be doing something different. And the last thing I always like to do when I'm talking to an owner is like, "Do you recognize that you are probably part of the problem?" Not all of it, just part of it. And so when I'm able to have that conversation with them, and kind of usually they'll say it to me, "Yeah, I think I'm holding the things back," or "I'm not very good at this," or "I'm not good in letting go of the vine." And all of those, I'm like, "Okay, great, we can work with this." But when I come in and work with a leadership team, I'm not a consultant. I'm not here to tell you how to run a business. I have no idea. You probably know how to run your business. Nate, you know how to run a Foundry better than I do. But what I do have is, all I spend my time doing is working with entrepreneurial leadership teams. And so, just like a good coach, I'm going to see things that you can't see, because you're in the middle playing the game and I'm on the outside looking in. And so I'm helping these these leaders become better, run a better business, and honestly take good care of their employees, and create a vision for them that the employees want to be a part of. Stop having this kind of haphazard, kind of the way we run the business based on the owner's opinion, where, well, he decided to do it this today and that tomorrow, and it's confusing and no one knows what's happening. So I'm just helping them, kind of like, this is how we're going to run our business. This is how we make our decisions. This is how we manage our employees. And we're going to create a vision that we want our employees to be a part of. So it's so different from corporate America. It really,
It sounds like,
it's how.
it sounds like you're going from, you're working with the top down, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
where change can happen, whereas my experience has always been, it seems like a bottom up sort of experience, is employees are expected to embrace this, but there's no support from above because they haven't been through the training. They're not doing it. They're not doing it. We're just kind of here. Things change. And because they're not involved, everything changes below too. But when you work with the top down, it sounds like you might have a better chance of getting things actually implemented and some change
A
to
lot of
actually
times
happen.
that happens a lot of times. I mean, if you don't get ownership or management buy-in, I mean, whether it's quality or process or any of those things, it's not going to be successful. It's going to be exactly what you described, Perry. Just from my experience of at least seeing and reading and seeing how that sort of thing happens. when it comes to ISO and things of that nature, process control. I mean, if it's not everybody from the top down, and that's the reason why leadership has to be and management has to be involved with that sort of thing. Otherwise, it's just a big mess.
Yeah.
Like, why are you guys doing what you're doing?
Again,
Yeah.
we used to joke about it being, the process du jour, right? I mean, this is what we're doing. Oh, today we're doing. Oh, good. Let's go off and go to class for a week, and come back and, do whatever. But anyway, well, I'm glad to hear. I mean, I've been through so many of them. I thought, "Yeah, surely there's somebody that's doing this right and doing something successful and helping people." But
Well, we can't answer that, Perry, for corporate, but for
yeah,
entrepreneurial companies that really want to break through the ceiling, maybe the owners are frustrated, they're not making as much money, nothing's working, they just don't know what to do. This is a system that helps them with their leadership team figure this out. And so I'm trying to teach them these tools that you use when running on EOS. And then once you've mastered it at the leadership team level, let's move it down to the next level. And we would need mastery. We don't just start rolling everything out at one time. That just creates confusion and nothing's going to stick. So it's just teaching them this 90-day cadence this 90-day world that we live in, so that you're just every 90 days coming back together. Are we still in the same? Are we going? Do we know where we're going? Do we know what our priorities are right now? And just working together as a team so they get comfortable with that. And then it has such a positive impact on all the employees. We're trying to teach. We're trying to get to the point where everyone in these companies are living their EOS life, which is doing what they love with people that they love, making a huge impact, appropriately compensated, and time for other passions. And if you think about that, Nate, as a Foundry owner, think about if every single one of your employees were living their EOS life. What's the impact on your company, on your employees' families, right? And on everyone around you. It's all for the betterment of all the employees. So,
Sure.
you, maybe it was in the conversation we had before we came on, but being sort of transparent and honest about what's going on, right? And if you can't fix a problem, if you're not able to recognize it and talk about it, do the employees, does the bottom layer ever get involved in this process, or does it just kind of trickle down to them, or how does that work?
no, I mean, like I said, we're rolling it out level, from leadership level, then down to their direct reports, and then down to their direct reports. But the idea is that we want to teach everyone in the organization to solve the issues in the organization at the appropriate level of the organization. So everything's not coming all the way up to the leadership team. So we're teaching them those skills. We're teaching them how to get better at solving issues, how to have these hard conversations. I'm also teaching all the leaders how to be better leaders and managers. So I always say we're got to do better care and feeding of our employees. We've got to do that better. We've got to show that we really care. So EOS is designed to help every level of the organization. It's just we start at the top,
Okay.
and then work our way down. Yeah.
But so a guy that's making molds, right, or pouring molds, if they're having an issue with something, they recognize that, we could do this better or whatever, or this is always a problem. I assume in the process, they would be encouraged to try to fix it, or at least go, "Hey, we have a problem here. We think we have an idea," and sort of talk about it and work it through. But to encourage to implement change for the betterment of the company, as opposed to just keep doing what you do,
Right.
right?
We don't we want to have some part of, like, there's 6 components of EOS, and one of them is the process component. That's getting the most important things in your business done the right and best way every single time. It creates consistency, scalability, makes it easier to manage, makes it more profitable. And I'm a process engineer, so I think a process makes everything a whole lot more fun. But when we do that, now you're doing this work, even if you're making molds, if you're pouring metal, I mean, if you're assembling wax patterns, whatever you're doing, let's figure out the right and best way to do this. And then we want to go back once we've established that every year, like, hey, how do we do this better? Well, maybe there's technology that can allow us to be better. And so we're always working towards improving the process. We don't just sit it here. And let's all agree that the people that know how to do that work are not the people up in the office. I don't know. I don't do this day in and day out. We need input from the experts, and the experts are people that have their hands in it day in and day out. And absolutely they need to be involved in that, establishing that process and helping improve a process that they're involved in.
And so, I mean, Nate, I assume that the demographic that Julie's talking about in terms of number of employees sort of fits a lot of the foundries out there. I mean, 15,
I think
20
it fits
people kind
the
of
vast
thing?
majority of them, yeah. I mean, a huge majority of them. Yeah, so I can't imagine it. I would think it would hit upwards of 90% of most small foundries. 250 employees is a lot. So, yeah, anything below that definitely hits them.
I was just thinking about process in your foundries. How do you handle it in the these foundries that you own?
So we're kind of reevaluating a lot of the processes that we have in place once
Yeah.
we've just purchased this facility. So I mean, it's there's a little bit of it a change in that regard, trying to get all the processes in place. To make sure that we have all the information. A lot of it is kind of tribal at this point. So getting it all nailed down and making sure that we're all going in the right direction. Then we've got the repeatability and that sort of thing for the processes is definitely something that we're getting nailed down at this point. Yeah.
Good. And are the employees feeling like they've got they're participating in developing those processes?
For the yeah, with what we've got going on, yeah, it's one of those things without their participation, it's hard to extract tribal knowledge. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of it, a lot of times you got certain people have certain silos of information, so trying to get that information so that everybody has the same ability to access that sort of information rather than hey, Bob over here just has his own little spreadsheet that he works off of and that sort of thing. So and you're always going to have some of that to some degree, but it's much better when we can all work on the same team and pull in the same direction.
All right. So
When
I'm
when
gonna
when it comes to the vision of everything, I mean, do you see with the vision and the traction and the the uh, the accountability and the discipline that goes along with that? Do you get much resistance with buy-in for a lot of companies that you help?
Where in the organization are you talking about? At the employee
Well,
level or
I would my gut says that most resistance would be towards the lower portion, upper management. I would think with if they're already if you got an owner that's already frustrated and wants them to to focus some change in the right direction because their things aren't going right. Well, I think you're going to get buy-in in that regard, or else you wouldn't have gotten approached. So my gut says it's probably the latter part, the workers and that sort of thing. As I go, here we go. But in that regard, what are some of the tools that are used to actually help move the ball forward in that regard?
so working with the leadership teams, what we're doing is getting them clear on the vision. And I won't get into all the details on that, but it's just, hey, who are we at our core? What are we the best at in the world? Where are we going long term? How are we going to get there? What does it need to look like 3 years from now on the way to achieving that long term goal? What are our goals for the 1 year plan? Like, what are we doing this upcoming year? And then we live in a 90-day world. So every 90 days, we
Okay.
set our priorities. What are the things that we're going to focus on? And so as a leadership team, you get crystal clear on that and just making sure they're clear on each of those aspects of the vision. And then once they're done, it takes a little while. It takes about 60 days working with me to fully nail that vision. Then I'm like, okay, you all know where you're going, how we're going to get there. Well, now we got to get everybody else to see it. We got everybody else to share in that vision. And the way we do that is we kind of need to tell them, right? Got to get them in a room and say, this is where we're going.
Sure.
And that's the part that's so important. And so every 90 days after they meet with me, then they're going to come back and have a state of the company meeting. They talk about the vision. They talk about how they did last quarter. They talk about what their priorities are in this upcoming year. And you're sharing this over and over again. And the human brain needs to hear something 7 times before it hears it for the first time. So what we're doing is communicating that over and over again. And the people that are excited about that vision, they're gonna lean in, they're gonna just be pumped up, maybe challenge it, ask some questions. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? The people who don't really want to be a part of that vision, they're probably gonna leave, right? Because they're just like, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to be the best foundry in whatever in whatever county you live in, or whatever that long range target is. And so we're trying to create a picture of, hey, do you want to be a part of this or do you not?
Hmm.
And so that's how we kind of handle. We want people to who are excited to be a part of that, because if you're excited about it, you're much more likely to work towards achieving it. And so that's the process. Is just it is set by the leadership team. It is 100%. They have to be on the same page, and then it's just share it with excitement to the rest of the employees, so they can get excited about being a part of it.
Well, it sounds like a healthy environment to be in for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing that I like the most and is my leadership teams are thinking about, what do the employees want? What's going to get them excited? Because there's lots of reasons to start a business, right? There are lots of different reasons you can start a business. You both know this, but it's not just about making money. So what's the why behind that? What's the thing that really tugs at your heartstrings as to why did you start this business? And then getting the employees to be excited about that as well. And so when they're excited and you're getting that why, you're going to get people that are much more committed to the to what you're trying to achieve. And so if you're focused on those things, gee, with the employees, I had one of my clients, they were trying to get 15% YOY, which I know what that means, 50% year over year growth. That was their 10-year target. That's kind of boring, right? Not very motivating. Figured it out in their last session. They're going to become a development hub for there's it's a big collective of different businesses in the same industry. They're excited. They can explain what that means to the employees, and everyone's super excited about it. So now they're all like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to be working towards achieving this, and we're going to have to make some changes in the way we're running a business because we're on a way to become this development hub." And so much more exciting than 15% YOY. So, how do you create that vision people are excited about? And that's really what we're trying to teach them to do. A little bit different from your experience.
Just a little bit. Yes. Yes, it is. And it's funny. I mean, the smaller companies I've worked at really never, most of those places I worked at were startups, and we talked about that as well. And they really didn't, they weren't looking at this, right? They were looking at conquering the world with their product, right? They're going to conquer the world with a product. And that's kind of the mentality they have. And they're not at the point of having a sustainable business and how do I grow it and how do I maintain it and how to, those kinds of things. They're just like, animals trying to get out there and get something done. So it's kind of a different world. So I've been in both. I've been in startup and I've been in corporate, and it's surprised I survived it. Such a different world. We talked about, we want to talk a little bit, I want to talk about investment casting. And I know very little about investment casting, and only what I have seen on things like YouTube, right? And I guess I've seen it in a sculpture foundry as well. And I've always thought it was interesting in the respect that it appears to be a medium that I can do very intricate things in, as opposed to sand. I'm used to sand, right? And a lot of the people that I know as hobbyists are into sand, but I'm starting to see more and more people as a hobbyist getting into investment. They're buying these little vacuum chambers, and they're able to put their plaster in and suck air out of it and get it so there's no voids in it and things like that. And they're pouring and they're melting the wax out. They're doing lost wax typically, and doing some pretty remarkable things. In their garage, they're making jewelry that looks pretty good, and other little things I mean, there'd be absolutely no way I could do it in sand, but I don't really have a lot of experience in what investment casting is beyond what I've seen on YouTube. Maybe you guys can. I mean, Nate, you've got a foundry doing it now. Julie, your background is investment casting. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about what is investment casting, why is it awesome, why would I use it over something else? I'm really kind of curious. Nate and I have talked recently about 3D sand printers and some of the capabilities they have, which I think are incredible. But why would I use investment over like a 3D sand printer? Is there things that I can do in investment that I can't do in sand?
The
Yeah,
difference.
for the most part, I mean, most of the surface finishes that you're going to get and the tolerances that you're going to get are vastly different than sand castings. That's the biggest factor. I mean, a lot of times you can get surface finishes that are remarkable. Some of them you don't even have to machine in certain aspects, depending on what the alloys are. Obviously there is still some post machining that goes in that's involved, but when you need small intricate parts that you couldn't cast in sand, or some of the nuances of what you can get out of a die for lost wax is vastly different. I mean, you've seen some of the surface finishes that you can get with sand, and they can be pretty good, but not anywhere near the quality that you can get of a wax pattern that is dipped and treed up and poured in a controlled manner. Especially if if you can control the process and or not if, but when you control the process for the moisture and that sort of thing, pulling it out of the kiln, and you can pour some very thin parts. I wish I would have brought one in, but there's we have a small real thin part that there's no way you could cast it any other way than in lost wax. So that's the biggest factor. The tolerances are tremendously better.
Yeah, I haven't done. I've just been investment casting, seen a couple green sand foundries. I think the thing I love about investment casting is is a process with a bunch of processes within it. And so as someone who loves process, I just
Mhm.
it's so amazing how what you're doing when you're talked about the surface finish from your wax, when you're injecting your wax and how that impacts your casting quality. But there's also, hey, how did you do when you attach the wax pattern to the mold? How did that impact it? Then you get into the shell and the different type of slurries, a different type of sand, how it's applied, all these things impact the overall quality of your casting. And so we kind of keep working through that, and it's just there's so many variables in there. I think we collected them once when I was teaching the process control class. We had like over 1,000 different variables that impact your the quality of your investment castings
Well,
throughout
that's
the
incredible.
process.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Are
Yeah.
people doing so again, I had this narrow vision of what it looks like. Are people doing large molds with investment, or is it
Yeah, they can do several 100 pounds in large facilities but you're gonna have to have the right way to handle those shells. A lot of times they're using some robots and things of that nature just because it's pretty difficult to do that by hand. But yes, to answer your question, you several 100 pounds. I mean, you can do that in investment castings,
and more?
Or
even
higher.
higher.
Might even
Yeah,
higher. There's some over in Europe, I think, that are doing up to 1,000 or more pounds
1,000 pounds. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's not everyone does that, obviously. You're limited by, yeah, the size of your tanks, your robot, there's a lot of in there, but yeah, very small to very large. It's amazing.
So you guys keep talking about you're talking about robots. Where do robots come into play here? Are they for moving molds around, or are they for machining molds, or what are
Yeah,
robots used for?
well, a lot of times you'll use a robot to, um, a lot of high production investment foundries. A lot of times will use a robot to dip multiple trees at one time. So they'll have a large slurry tank, let's say 600-gallon slurry tank, and they'll have a robot that comes and picks it up, and it has like a tree that has, let's say, 5 or 6 arms on it that will have multiple trees on it, and it'll pick it up as one autonomous unit, and then go and dip it, spins it in a circle in the slurry tank, picks it back up, and then puts it in the rainfall to get the stucco to coat those trees all at one time because they need to do things in a higher production fashion. So, and then they put those in on a cart or in some sort of a conveyor system to actually go remove the humidity from the room with air conditioning and move a lot of air and things of that nature to get those shells dry so they're ready for the next process. Again, that's what we're a process like KPI dry would come into place, especially for nailing down some of that sort of thing, so you can get the relative humidity down and that sort of thing. So it definitely makes a big difference. But that's where that, because you get that. Um, that weight, and the more shells that you go and dip on that, the heavier those things get, and so it just takes the ergonomics and the issues that you run into with humans out of play, and you can do it relatively quickly, and you can automate some of that sort of thing.
Okay.
So I can
Yeah.
only imagine what it's like to do 1,000 pound shell or for 1,000 pound casting. That would be pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, they're using robotics and other aspects of the process as well. I mean, my expertise is in the shell room, but there's other areas where they're using robotics. But yeah, those molds, I had them when I first came into the industry. I was taught how to hand dip, and those molds can get really heavy. And then when you're heavy, I mean, Nate, you're doing it by hand, is that right? Are you hand
Yeah.
dipping?
Yes, ma'am.
And so these operators are getting tired and they're spinning. They've got to then you want to have the same consistency on how many revolutions you make at all these different angles. So and that's just adding variability if you don't have a robot to do it. And you got to have a really strong person, typically males, not always, that are able to handle that hour after hour of doing that hand dipping. It's not easy. So
I can
Nate
imagine.
can
And
attest to that.
doing it repeatably, right angle, the same rotation, all that. That's gets, especially at the end of the day, it
Right.
gets harder and harder to do.
Absolutely.
So you
Yeah.
touched on something else. I mean, that I think is interesting is, so Nate, I mean, you're coming out of the sound world primarily, and Julie, you're doing investment. I assume that there are different skill sets within the Foundry that maybe don't interact or don't cross over very much. I mean, do you see that, Nate, in your world? Do you see that where guys that are doing investment are also doing sand, or?
It's not, you don't see that very often. I mean, our facility here is very unique in the fact that we have sand and we have investment in the same facility. That doesn't exist. Usually, they're either an investment foundry or they're a sand foundry. So it's kind of unique, and it's unique in the fact that the way that it was originally set up back in 2011 to do aerospace type stuff, and the sand was just part of something that they needed to fill a niche or a void whenever they needed to do other stuff. So, but yeah, no, as things change, it's for like this facility in particular. Yeah, it's not standard by any means. A lot of it doesn't necessarily cross over. Once you have the shells created and you've gone through the autoclave and you've gone through the kiln, um, the melt and pour. I mean, you've got a lot of the same things cross over in that regard. And then obviously after the castings are poured, you're processing and you're shaking out and cutting off and grinding, that sort of thing. So heat treat process is still the same, whether it's sand cast or investment cast. So it just depends on the alloys.
I guess in reality, there is quite a bit of commonality in the work. Maybe not in the
Yeah,
molding
the
work.
front end, yeah, the front end,
Front
you
end is
you have
different.
much less things that cross over. When it comes to a wax, pattern, and then, and to dipping and shelling, I mean, that definitely does not cross over. Those are 2 totally different things, and the process controls that go into to play with the slurries and things of that nature for your primary and your backup slurries, and, it definitely makes a difference.
I had a guy that one of my customers number of years ago. He said he and a friend of his started in the foundry at the same day. He was put into the shell room, and his buddy went into the foundry. And it was in the Midwest, and it was summer, and it was miserably hot. I mean, they're pouring metal, pouring steel at what 20,
3,000.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they're pouring steel at what, yeah, 3,028, whatever, and the guy is just baking in there. And then this my friend is he ends up in the shell room and it's all air conditioned and that's humidity controlled 72 degrees, plus or minus 2 degrees or something like that. And he stayed in the industry, that guy left. so there's a big difference between what room you end up in that process, decide whether or not you're gonna stick around.
He
So
probably lived a
yeah.
lot longer. I'm curious about I'm sure about the shell process, and my vision of it is, someone will make a wax pattern, I'm not sure how you do that, especially with some of these bigger
It look
things.
it basically look just think of it as a core box, Barry. It's like a core box, and then you actually get the positive of what the part is actually gonna look like.
So you pour wax into a core box or some
Yeah, you
pattern,
inject hot wax into it. Yes, sir.
and you remove the pattern, the box, and then you have wax, and then you start coating it. Okay, with the
Yeah, you
slurry
would
and the
glue it to basically a pouring cup and a sprue for the most part. You'd glue them on there, and then once you have the right
right.
quantity and the right locations so that you don't have a lot of times you don't put anything directly across from one another, you're gonna stagger them so that they actually get feed metal from the sprue because you only get so much risering in that regard. So, it just depends on what the process or what you've dialed in that regard. So and then you would start to coat them with the slurry process and the stucco sand or coarser
I was
stucco.
going to ask Joey, do you call it stucco up in the Northwest?
Oh, the Northwest is, I call it both. It depends. It's stucco, it's sand. Kind of use them interchangeably. So, yeah.
I didn't know if
Yeah.
that was a local, a local term with Nate or if it was,
It looks like
No,
sand to me, but
yeah.
hey, the people in that I've talked to, they refer to it as stucco. So to try to keep semantics the proper, I guess that's the reason why I say stucco. But it looks like sand to me.
All right.
it does look like sand. Yeah, just different courses, different, and then different suppliers call it different things depending on the size of the grains. And I mean, there's a lot of differences in there, but I think we all know what we're talking about if you've spent a lot of time in that room. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Well, what else can we talk about as far as investment?
Well, you asked about some of the differences from foundry to foundry, but I think it's different skill sets also come into play in a foundry. I always used to laugh because when I came in the industry, I spent 2 weeks working in a foundry, and I had to do like every job. The only job I didn't do was I didn't pour metal. But I did do the heat chemistry, but I didn't actually pour. But they 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 gave me a tree and they told me to put these little tiny parts on the tree, and then everyone went to a meeting. All the employees went to a meeting, and they came back and they looked at my tree and they laughed at me. They said, "Julie, we're not making any money off of you." Um, my hands are too big. Like I couldn't do it. So, but what I've found is there's a lot of women in the wax room who have that dexterity, who are really good at putting small pieces on a tree. And I have so much respect for their ability to do that because I just don't have that. I just cannot do that. So when I think about, do you see more male or female in the foundries? I see a lot of females in the wax room, except for at Mercury Marine. They're all men there because they're bigger pieces. They could do that. But what we need is more women in engineering in the metal casting. We need to see more women in there. And I just, if you got somebody listening right now, the process is amazing. Investment casting process is like one of my favorite processes because there's so much going on and there's so many different variables. And so I just want to encourage anyone who's not sure if they want to be in the foundry industry to like come take a look at it, because we will always need to make castings in the United States. I don't see that ever completely going away. We got all the aerospace parts, right? Those have to stay in the US. It's a great industry. It's a great opportunity to just be a part of something that is like nothing else. I mean, I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I never get tired of watching them pour metal. Nate, do you ever get tired of it?
No, that's the thing that drew me to the foundry industry in general. I mean, it was that walking up on that melt deck and seeing them melt that steel and pig iron and everything in that iron foundry down to just molten lava, and seeing them dump it out and go pour it into something useful. Very very gratifying. There's nothing like it. Perry, he experiences that in his garage when you can melt aluminum and melt it and pour it. I mean, there's something to behold. It's awe inspiring to be able to melt metal.
Yeah, especially aluminum. Aluminum's so beautiful, right? It's just,
Very
oh,
pretty.
watch it.
Yep,
It's just
and
so
done properly. I
beautiful.
mean, when you fill a mold up, I mean, it's got a mirror finish on it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just beautiful.
Yeah. We can't not talk about investment casting and not talk about the importance of having we need new people. We need young, fresh blood that wants to come in and be a part of this amazing industry and this amazing process. And there was, back in the early 1900s, I mean, this process has been around for thousands of years, but there was this art. It was the art of pouring, of making castings. And yes, there's an art. I remember talking to a melt deck operator he would pour by color of the metal.
Mm.
That's how he
Yeah.
did it. He did not measure it. He did it by color. I mean, it's so amazing. But now we have technology, and we need to use that technology in the process to take some of that art out because we don't necessarily have that experience. And so that's the thing is if you're thinking about foundries, think about coming in investment casting because there's new technology coming in. The castings are getting larger. There's more complexity. There's so much happening. There's such a great opportunity. So I couldn't be on this podcast without saying, hey, look, we need to bring young people into this industry. And if there's anybody out there who wants to talk to me about my experience, I'd be happy to have that conversation with them as well.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it's definitely something that is needed for sure, especially with the cost of higher education and college tuition and things of that nature. And there's a lot of people that have just figured out, that maybe college isn't for them. Obviously, I mean, I would never tell anybody not to go to college, but I will say that there is something to be said for being able to get up, do an honest day's work at a facility that it has been around for many years and decades, and do something that in the grand scheme of things, I mean, you're never away from a casting at any given time. I mean, you're close to them all the time, and you just don't realize it. Most Americans don't realize it, and it's pretty cool to when you start actually looking at them. And when you're working a foundry, of course, you spot all kinds of castings just because you're kind of a casting dork. But and then it's a fun business to be in. Best job I've ever had. I've probably
I
said
agree.
that 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Hey, you mentioned that, art of and in my limited experience, it's almost a fine there's like a blurring of the line between art and engineering too, because I think there is an art, while it's also it's an engineering thing, to developing a good mold, right? To getting the right feeders, the right method, everything that you've got to do to put together, but it's a work of art when it's done. It may be well engineered, and maybe there may be a lot of engineering concepts involved, whether it be looking at cooling, looking at shrinking, looking at metal flow speeds, all that. But they're a thing of beauty when they're done, and I think that can be appealing to those that are artistic. They get to look at that and just think, wow, that is beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. So,
Mhm.
do you know
I gotta say,
do you know of any other
Go ahead.
organizations that are helping to get young people into the foundry business? We talked with NFFS last week, and they're trying to do some things. You worked with ICI for a while. We're on the board there. Are you aware of any other activities out there in the industry that are trying to help get people involved, get younger people involved?
The board for the Investment Casting Institute had developed kind of a foundry. I'm not gonna say this right. It's like foundry in a box, but it's really just an educational box that you could buy and take it into schools, local schools. And so I know there were members of the board that were doing that, along
Hmm.
with the previous executive director was very much involved. And how do we get more and more people involved into the industry? And the fact is, even if you take a metal, some sort of metal casting class in college, they talk about an investment casting about this much.
Mm.
So we've got to educate the youth up through high school about, hey, look what you could do, look how great this is. And so we've got to be proactive about getting people in there. And so that was one of the focuses that the Investment Casting Institute was working on, was bringing more people in there. But we also, Nate, you and I involved, are included, are just, we have to encourage these people that aren't sure. We got to get them to stay, because I've seen a lot of good people come and they don't feel they have the opportunities, and so we've got to continue to invest in the engineers and the youngsters that are in the industry now, and keep them here, because
Yep,
it
for
is a
sure.
great industry and it's got a great future for the U.S.
I
Yeah,
agree.
salt of the earth people. It's an exciting industry to be in, for sure. It doesn't get a lot better than this, that's for sure. So yeah, it's encouraging, and it's nice to hear, especially when there's a process engineer, of course, thinking about all of the different aspects of what goes into even a sand foundry, but investment foundry in general. Yeah, I could see how you would nerd out on processes for sure, because everything has a process. So
Everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all of it.
Yeah.
Yep, everything, even down to locating the silly die that you need to go make a wax pattern on. There's a process involved for that. So yeah, pretty fun stuff.
Yeah, and there's fewer and fewer machinists out there, and so you need people that have the skill set to build the tooling, right? I mean, that's another part of it, that, hey, we need people out there that are doing that. And if you have an interest in that, go talk to Nate, go talk to someone that say, hey, look, I want to learn more about this, because it's a skill set that we need, that's harder and harder to find. So
Yep,
yeah.
yep. And they're in high demand for sure. So just anybody. I mean, I tell people all the time, that if the one thing you need to do is a just show up to work and be coachable. And you know what, the sky's the limit at that point. As long as you do those two things, and you retain the knowledge, and you want to be a good teammate, man, it's pretty easy after that.
Yeah, I think also just enjoy the process of learning. I think that's another
Mhm.
part of it. Sometimes it's like, oh, I want to become an expert. Well, you become an expert by showing up every day and just being
Absolutely.
open to learning it. And if you can have that attitude, you have that opportunity to just find people who are going to invest in you, and you're going to have all this experience. But you have to enjoy the process of, one, not knowing very much, and knowing you're on a journey to learn a whole bunch more. So that's the part that I
Absolutely.
that I want to encourage people to do. It's going to be great. You're gonna have a great time. You're gonna see some beautiful things along the way.
Yep, without a doubt. Yeah, and some of these younger kids, they're 20 years old, 18 years old, and they're not really sure what they want to do. Man, find a mentor, find somebody that can help coach you along the way. Most people, especially retired guys, I mean, they'll help you along. If you see somebody that has done something, or you're curious about it, ask. Most people want to tell their story, so it's always fun to hear those type of things, and maybe do it over a cup of coffee or anything like that. So it's always fun to see how people have made their life decisions, and how they've ended up where they're at. What's their story? And again, in the process, you're going to learn something along the way that you may not have learned otherwise.
Nate, that's such a great point. I mean, that's such a great. I wouldn't be where I am today without my mentors. And these are people that invested in me, and they didn't. It really wasn't any way for me to get back to them. So I always tell
Hmm.
them, whoever invested in me, I'm like, I promise you, I'm paying that forward. So
Sure.
go find someone that you want to have a conversation with, and see if they're willing to spend some time with you. Because yeah, none of us got to where we are today alone, and so we owe it to the people that helped us to help others along the way. And it's such a
Agreed.
great point, Nate.
Great
Yep.
point. Well, I think at that that's a great way for us to wrap this up. Julie, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it. We'll put links out to your uh, e-process innovation site. Tell people what you're up to, so they can get a hold of you if they want to. Thank you for
Yeah.
your
And if
insights.
you want to hear, I was just going to say, if you want to learn anything about chickens, I actually have a newsletter. It's called Cooped Up Thoughts, and I talk
Ah,
about my adventures to become an inspiring chicken mama, and I tie it to the work I do. So if you want a little humor talking about chickens and business, you can find that on my website. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well.
there you
Super.
go.
We'll have
Key
to look
Prost
for.
Innovations, man, for all of the knowledge, chickens, EOS, and some investment KPI drying technology. How fun!
Yeah.
We really appreciate it, Julie, and you're a treat.
Thank you.
All right.
So great to be
Thanks.
here. Thank you. All
We
right.
wish you well.
Bye.